Some of the things that we'll be discussing today is the new acknowledgement of President Obama of the school to prison pipeline, the recommendations, and we'll also talk about the role of the church, the community, and parents in stopping the school to prison pipeline.
The key phrase in your introduction was this phrase, coming together. I had the pleasure some years ago of traveling throughout the continent, throughout Africa, and I remember on one occasion we went into a village, and while we were at that village we saw young girls being initiated. There was a ceremony where they were being initiated into adulthood. They were moving from their adolescent years, and so there was a ceremony that said, now you're an adult. And so I asked one of the ladies in the village to explain what had just gone on. And she explained that for weeks up until that point, these young ladies had all been taught by all the other members of the village in the responsibilities and obligations of adulthood. So they weren't sent off to, it wasn't the parents' responsibility to teach them, it wasn't the school's responsibility to teach them, it was the entire village's responsibility to.
Well, you just hit on something very significant that oftentimes you don't hear a lot of press about, and that is, in many instances, there is no village anymore. When urban renewal happened in the 50s and 60s, after Eisenhower came back and saw the Autobahn in West Germany and said, we need to have interstate highways here in the United States, which is a great thing to have. But the problem is most of the interstates, whether it's the east, west, or north, south, they went through historic black villages, black communities. And so you don't have that anymore. And so most people don't live in the neighborhood where they grew up. But those were historic areas where you could get employment, and that was part of it was due to segregation. But with integration and the destruction of those villages, as it were, then you had even more displacement. And I really think we need to commend Michelle Alexander for her new book, The New Jim Crow, which talks about mass incarceration. And that's why it's important to know our history, because if you look at history, you had slavery. The first and foremost thing about enslavement was socioeconomic. We need to get that tobacco, the sugar cane, and the cotton. We don't have to pay for that. And so then with emancipation, it's great that people are free, but I didn't allow you to read or write, so how are you going to be free and you have no skills? And so then when that happens, then you have other issues. So you have sharecropping. And with sharecropping, now you have the prison pipeline, prison industrial complex. So it's all about how can we have cheap labor. So it's not just license plates anymore, it's the components that are in our computers. And so we have to understand a systemic problem if we're going to ever get to the issue, to the bottom of it. So one of the things that the church needs to do is just like what Marva Collins did. She was educated in South Side schools of Chicago, got tired of all the paperwork, said, these babies can learn, I believe in them. They took the top floor of their brownstone and they had all the kids who were quote-unquote uneducable, those kids who couldn't read, those kids who had behavioral problems, whatever the issues were. These were the children who were supposed to fail. And the statistics show, and even 60 Minutes did a program on her, none of the kids ended up being pregnant out of wedlock, none of the kids ended up dead.